Hello, and welcome to this presentation on integrating student-centered learning into curriculum, brought to you by myself, Ryan Emry. This is my final culminating project for EDUC 925, Curriculum Theory and Practice with Dr. William C. Calla. I'd like to begin by asking you all to think back to a time in your education. It could be any time and at any age, and if you would, briefly picture what the classroom setting was like. If you grew up attending traditional public schools like myself, then most likely you have pictured a room with a teacher at the front of the class, near the board, and yourself assigned somewhere in a seat in a set of individualized columns and rows. If this was the case for you, then I'm also willing to bet that your lessons were primarily lecture-based, in which the teacher would direct the lessons from the front of the class, while the students were to listen attentively and absorb the information being transmitted. Whether your education was more traditional or non-traditional, it's safe to assume that we all have been subjected to a fair amount of lecture-based lessons throughout our educational career. We can identify this type of learning experience to what is referred to as passive learning. Passive learning lessons are typically teacher-centered, typically administered through lecture, reading, audio-visual, or demonstration and replication. While this form of learning can offer its values for cognitive development and be well suited for addressing detailed information or large bodies of knowledge, it is more and more thought of as less effective, less impactful, and less developmental in its mode of teaching and learning. In the opposing realm of thought, we have what's known as active learning. Active learning is more student-centered, places a heavy emphasis on student inclusion and gaining knowledge through discovery. Active learning techniques are more along the lines of things like discussion, practicing and doing, teaching others, and alternative approaches to learning rather than text, lecture, assessment-based learning. Active learning has been shown to give learners deeper levels of development through their individual construction and assimilation of knowledge. It is highly more democratic in its approach. As active learning is an all-inclusive approach, it relies upon collaboration and cooperation in order to operate accordingly. Here for you is a short TED Talk by a man named Joe Rule, who has been teaching for nearly 40 years. In this talk, he will help us dive a bit deeper into the possibilities and actualities of student-centered, active learning techniques and how we might implement.
I have one of the best jobs in the world because I get to work with people who are fun, funny, energetic, creative, and insightful. And they happen to be 14 to 18 years of age. I really do think kids keep a person young, and I think that's probably why when I'm in the presence of adults, I sometimes don't know how to act, so you'll forgive me. So, inspiring the students of the future. What really works? 37 years of teaching experience have taught me that two things are needed: research-based teaching techniques and relationship. Relationship is huge, but we'll talk more about that later. What I'd like to look at first are the techniques. I think probably most of us remember the teacher-centered classroom. This is probably what we're familiar with from our youth. You remember the teacher was up front and center. The students were in nice, neat rows, not allowed to talk to each other. And the teacher, the source of authority, downloaded information to the kids who regurgitated it back up on a test designed to measure how much content they could remember. Now, I have to admit, I love lecturing, but my students don't always love it. It does not always inspire. So I was thinking, what really inspires? Years ago, I was doing lunch duty at school, standing in the lunchroom, being visible, watching kids go through the cafeteria line. And as I watched the kids going through the line, it occurred to me, they love having choices. And so I said to myself, maybe that would work in the classroom. Let the kids have choices. And so that's what I did. I converted my classroom to a situation where student choice was a big part of the room, along with 4 other C's: collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. Actually, over 10 years ago, the National Education Association identified those last 4 C's on the list as essential 21st century skills that kids should learn, and I agree wholeheartedly. I've added choice to the top of the list, not as a skill for kids to learn, but rather as a characteristic of the classroom. By choice, I mean a situation where many learning activities are available to students, designed to meet the many diverse learning styles that they have. And the kids love it as much as they love choices in the cafeteria. Now, I think we're made for learning this way. Imagine our early hominid ancestors out looking for food. Don't you know that finding and tracking that woolly mammoth required critical thinking and problem solving? It definitely required collaboration, teamwork. I mean, you wouldn't want to do this by yourself. No way. And collaboration required communication. And then I imagine those people sitting around the campfire at night, reliving the adventures of the day's hunt. They must have had smiles on their faces when they were retelling the story of the hunt. And I know they smiled when they put those cave paintings up on the wall, because creativity is a uniquely human, pleasurable, satisfying activity. So I believe our brains are wired for the 5 C's. And since they're wired for the 5 C's, that authentic learning will happen when kids are allowed to engage in the 5 C's. And not just learning, but I think kids will enjoy a classroom setup like this and even be inspired in this way. Now, this requires a classroom setup based on the 5 C's requires a shift from a teacher-centered classroom to a student-centered classroom. And this requires the teacher to remove him or herself from front and center, becoming more of a guide on the side rather than a sage on the stage. But this opens up opportunities to not merely teach, but to coach, to mentor, to nurture, and inspire. And that's why I love it so much. Now, time out. It's important for me to mention these are not my original ideas. I stand on the shoulders of giants. Remember Plutarch? He said it a long time ago. The mind is not a vessel that needs filling, but wood that needs igniting. And more recently, Albert Einstein. Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. All right, you're going to have to bear with me. I'm going to get real goosebumply for a minute. One of the absolute most exciting moments of my life, my professional life, was meeting Albert Einstein just a few years ago. Changed my life bumping into him in that wax museum. What a moment it was. So I stand on the shoulders of giants. Giants like Montessori and Piaget. And Dr. Sam Postlethwaite, who was doing a lot of these things in his biology classes at Purdue University back in the 1960s. I'm a product of the Purdue biology department. That's where I fell in love with biology. I stand on the shoulders of giants like Tom Watson and Steve Randack, who were doing this back in the 1970s in their high school biology classes. I stand on the shoulders of many giants called elementary school teachers and special ed teachers. So I'm a product of all of those mentors. So collaboration, communication, critical thinking, creativity, and student choice.
So after watching the video, it's very plain and simple to see that learning can be much more effective and beneficial when it is student-centered and active learning focused. And if we needed any additional evidence to support our case, we need look no further than Bloom's taxonomy, which shows us the lower order thinking skills, typically attributed to the traditional passive methods, all the way to the higher order thinking skills, which are more likely to occur in active learning approaches. So how might we help to ensure that our classroom and curriculum are student-centric and active learning based? Well, it can be as simple as following the 5 C's as outlined in the video. Just to recap, those are choice, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. And in fact, that's just what we did over the course of a week-long student-led project that we ran for the grade 4 classes at the school that I teach at. The assignment was based on one of our selected grade 4 readers, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, in which the students did group presentations based upon their selected chapters from the text. This was a totally new approach to this portion of the curriculum this year, as we have tried various other options in the past, which all were more resemblant of passive-based learning and teaching techniques. Some of these techniques from the years of grade 4 past were reading aloud in class, either teacher-led, student-led, round robin, choral read, or a hodgepodge of them all. We also tried the read and recap approach, similar to a book review format, and even went as far as writing up an extensive set of reading comprehension questions in order to check each student's individual comprehension of the text, and even more so, to have the students practice at writing complete sentence answers. As you could imagine, these approaches led to very low levels of student engagement and even lower levels of student excitement. In fact, it could be more accurate to say that the kids absolutely dreaded it. There was no real visible return on skills development in reading comprehension, literacy, or ability, nor were there any lasting effects or evidence of increased writing abilities. This section of the curriculum had felt less like going into a classroom of teaching and learning, and more like enforcing a set of chores which had to be done. It's safe to say there was some room for improvement. So to transform this part of the curriculum, we adopted the chapter teaching model as done in this course itself on the texts, the curriculum, and the element. We modified it into being more of a group-based project and added a couple of extra options for the students to choose from as their mode of presentation. We were most definitely determined to bring out the element with this newly constructed approach. We kicked off the project by giving the students a series of choices to make. Students were given total autonomy over choosing their group members, which chapter they wanted to do their presentation on, and how they wanted to present their chapter to the rest of the class. Some of the suggested options for students to choose were a PowerPoint, performance, a poster, presentation, or any other idea of their choosing. What resulted is that the students effectively chose their groups, took the time to glance over the chapters and make a group-based decision on which one they wanted to choose, and, most surprisingly of all, every group requested and opted for using multiple forms of media in which to present their chapter to the class. In the end, every single group ended up with a PowerPoint, a poster, in addition to some type of performance, animation, or selective readings of their chapter. You can very easily see from these pictures that were taken at the beginning during the selection process that students were much more enthusiastic, energized, and enjoying of the process when given choice, autonomy, and responsibility. The collaborative elements of the project were engineered by repurposing the assignment into a group-based project. By allowing the students the ability to manage their own projects and work, and providing them with enough class time in order to accomplish what they wished, we gave them the space to work together and manage themselves in order to meet the deadline of the presentation date. The grouping component allowed students to work together in a dynamic and collaborative fashion. It was fun to witness each student drawing upon specific skills, ideas, or abilities in which to contribute to their group's overall project, and also the students being able to participate actively in the specific tasks or areas that were of particular interest to them. Just by the nature of students being able to contribute in their own ways towards the group's end goal, it was very clear that this created a greater level of buy-in and personal investment by the students into what they were doing. As you can witness for yourself from these pictures, over the process of the different activities and assignments, there was nothing but collaboration taking place every step of the way. The project's design allowed for communication to take place in a variety of forms and countless interactions. Inter-team communications occurred the whole time, from the start to the completion of the project, and they were extended to the entirety of the class during the presentations themselves. To cap it all off, a deeper level of literacy and language assimilation occurred in the process of the groups taking the content from the book and formulating it into their own versions of verbal and nonverbal communications. What resulted from the ongoing communications over the course of the project was a deeper understanding of the language and the content from the text itself. This led to the knowledge creating a deeper imprint and longer lasting effect on each individual. There were obvious developments in speech preparation and articulation taking place, as the students were the creators of their own dialogues. In addition, the interactions that were taking place were at a much more frequent and all-inclusive level than had been in the previous years where the passive techniques had been administered. Here we have pictures of some of the student groups taken just before they were to give their presentation to the rest of the class. If you look closely, you can see the sense of excitement in the students about the process of giving this presentation to their peers, which is a much more desirable state and response than the anxiety, uncertainty, or insecurities that people usually accustom with public speaking or giving presentations. Most definitely, this could lead to much more productive and constructive experience for the students in building skills of public speaking. In making this a group-based, fully autonomous, student-centered, and student-led assignment, there were many challenges that would take place and offer a multitude of junctions for critical thinking to occur. First and foremost, the groups would need to read and understand what was happening in their chapter with careful analysis. They needed to do this so that they would be able to strategize about it and go about how they wanted to construct and deliver their presentations to the rest of the class. At the heart of it all, what they were really doing is being challenged to take words from a page and information and knowledge from their heads and turn it into something material and tangible for their peers to see and experience. In order to accomplish these things successfully, the students really needed to gain a deep integration of the knowledge. From the autonomous, active learning, student-centered and led approach, like in this project, we can see that the students develop more than just reading, writing, or specific cognitive skills. Rather, they're developing skills on a much larger spectrum in addition to these. They are faced with real scenarios in which real problem-solving strategies need to be applied and need to occur. When students have freer rein to explore and discover, this leads to more complex thought process as well as outside of the box thinking to occur. And all of this is right in alignment with what we have now learned to be transformational and transcendental knowledge or learning, as the students are building the types of skills that they can apply to multifacets of their life outside of the classroom. Here are but a few examples of some points along the project where critical decisions were being made. And those critical decisions required critical thinking, thinking that was not only drawing upon the students' past experiences, but also relying upon their future projections for how things might play out over the course of the project and their presentation. When students are given total autonomy, little to no directions, a go for it and give it a shot mentality by their teachers, as well as being constantly reminded that issues and problems are not only expected to occur, but are welcomed, then it's truly miraculous at what types of things can take place within the minds of the students and within the realm of the classroom. As stated, when creativity is allowed to work its magic, remarkable things happen, not only in regards to the students' produced work, but to the ideas in which they explored in order to come up with what they did. Allowing for creativity to thrive and flourish gave the students greater senses of accomplishment and achievement that had not been experienced by others before who had done this assignment in the more passive learning techniques. It brought a new and fresh energy of possibilities into the classroom. And last but not least, it was much more fun. As you can see, the students went full on and all out with their posters, PowerPoints, performances, and even introduced me to a new animation programming website called Scratch, where students can program their own short animated videos. Here for you are pictures of the posters that the students created for their presentations, as well as followed by a short video containing clips from many of the students' group presentations in class. I hope you enjoy.
Today we're going to talk about The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Very
Chapter 1, Terry Tales.
The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Chapter 1, Terry Town.
Very good.
You like reading?
The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Chapter 2.
Nice. All right.
There are a lot of young, beautiful girls in.
How many beautiful girls in Terry Town? A lot.
So Colin, raise your hands. Go ahead, call on anyone.
A lot. Okay. No, do not get it. How old is
Very good.
Today I'm going to tell a story about the legend of Sleepy Hollow, chapter 3.
Nice start.
Chapter 3 is a letter from Mr. Van Tassel. One beautiful October afternoon, Ichabod was at school with the boy. A man came to the school. He had a letter for Ichabod.
Okay, what did Brahm ask people? Any ideas? Okay, Mac attack? Oh, okay. Yeah. Got a couple of hands up. Who do you guys want to call on?
Some people from Sleepy Hollow were there. They talked about the strange noises and looks there. One story was a long time after this, an old farmer went to New York. Terry Tanner said, Ichabod, isn't dead. He lives in New York. Why did he go there? The people asked him. On the night of the death of the Van Tassel farm, he went to the Sleepy Hollow. He was afraid of the ghost. And there, and off, the ghost rider in Sleepy Hollow, he went away. Where is he? Maybe he's in Sleepy Hollow.
He was there on his horse after the dance. Maybe he's there now.
Ichabod, are you here? Ichabod, where are you?
Is this Ichabod?
Yes, it is.
What's this?
Why is there a pumpkin here? Maybe it was a pumpkin. Who?
Ichabod was on his old horse.
Oh my
And it was very dark and quiet. In Sleepy Hollow, Ichabod remembered the ghost story. And he was afraid. Maybe the ghosts are here now, he said. Was it the tree with the ghost? There were strange noises. His horse was afraid too, but it walked slowly. I want to go home quickly, he said. Suddenly, his horse stopped near a small river, but the horse didn't move. Was there a person near Ichabod and his horse? I lost it. It was gone. It was gone.
Well, this brings us to the end of the presentation, and I hope now you're feeling like it is the time for you to make your classroom and curriculum more active learning focused and more student centered. I hope you'll be reminded to keep yourself open to the greatness that can be achieved from continuing to explore and discover the possibilities within your classroom and, most importantly, within your students. Be encouraged to create a democratic learning experience, and be okay if that experience is one in which student and teacher walk hand in hand through the learning process and journey together. And at the least, never lose sight of the power and position that you have to inspire, ignite, and invent. Hopefully you found this presentation educational, enjoyable, and invigorating. And also, I hope now that you are enthusiastic about transforming your students, your classroom, yourself, and your curriculum. Thank you.